Next on Biotech Bites, join me, your host, Steve Swan, for an awesome conversation with Bill Wallace, the CIO of Intercept Pharmaceuticals, on the evolving role of AI within biotechnology companies and the rise of the bionic professional. Yes, bionic professional. Tune in. Welcome to Biotech Bites. I'm your host, Steve Swan, where we chat with IT leaders within biotech. Today, we have a treat. We have our first repeat customer, Bill Wallace, head of IT at Intercept. We last spoke with Bill, I think, about a year and a half ago or something, Bill?
Yeah, January of 24.
There we go.
The first Biotech Bites. If anybody
Yeah,
wants to go back and take a look.
yeah, exactly. And so this is great. Want to sync back up with Bill, do a little update, hear what's going on, hear what he thinks has changed in the last year and a half. And as always, for our listeners, if you like what you see and or hear, don't forget to follow us on Google, Spotify, Apple, and like us. So, Bill, welcome. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you. Great to be here, Steve.
So as you know, as we've done in the past, in case somebody's watching you here for the first time, they may go back and watch the other one. But just to give folks a brief introduction on you that may not have seen the last one, can you give me a quick, I don't know, minute or so on your background and what's led you to be the head of IT here at Intercept?
Sure. So I have a varied background. My first 10 years, I actually was not in technology at all. I was on the business side, first in finance for 5 years, and then in marketing for 5 years. And then something really wild and crazy called the World Wide Web came along, and that started my transition to technology, which is where I've been ever since. And although I haven't worked in several industries, most recently, I spent the last several decades in pharmaceutical and biotech. And along that time, I've worked for some of the largest companies, Pfizer, midsize, and more recently have been CIO at several organizations, some of which were building their teams. I had to build the teams from scratch because they were pre-commercial, looking to launch their first product. And so I was their first hire in IT in several cases when they were under 100 employees and about to grow very rapidly. So now I've been with Intercept in December. It'll be 4 years, and am very eager to talk about how AI has changed, even in the year and a half plus that we've talked.
Let's get into it, right? So last we spoke, we talked about AI, right? And like you said, it's changed a lot. I mean, I think probably every couple of weeks you can say that things have completely morphed. So since the last year and a half, tell us, give us an update on how you see it, what's changed, and maybe where you think we're heading. I know that's going to be a mouthful, but let's dive right into it.
Well, I would say that the general capabilities have changed quite a bit, mostly for the positive. And at the same time, just about everybody is using AI in some way, shape, or form, whether they're using it for personal or professional. And there's still a lot of learning going on, and some people know it better than others and are more interested than others. But it is one of those things where you pretty much can't have any conversation about business and technology without having a conversation about AI. It is truly where the internet was in the early 90s in terms of business and technology starting to partner and collaborate together to figure out how it can be utilized by the organization. And I wish I could take credit for this, but I have heard the term, and I think it's a very good one, bionic professional. Just like the Bionic Man and the Bionic Woman in the show in the early 70s, the AI, and if someone is able to really utilize AI within their business processes, it absolutely can be of a great help to them and make people more efficient, more effective, sometimes more timely. And at the same time, it's still very important to have the knowledge that the individual professionals have, because if there's one thing we've all heard about the AI hallucinations, AI itself can pull a lot of data together, and you teach it so that it pulls it in certain ways in certain aspects. But ultimately, for a lot of the best business insights, you still need a professional who has the experience in their given space to really be able to look at what's coming in and figure out what is truly insightful and what might be going down a bit of a blind path, because AI itself, the key part being the artificial part of intelligence, it doesn't in all cases put things together in the exact way that make logical sense. And just about everybody has seen this when they've used AI for their prompts, searching on the internet or different things. But it is something that is very important to understand and have that business background, skills, and experience when you're utilizing AI from a business perspective, which is why I think bionic professional is a great term.
Yeah, the bionic professional. I hadn't heard that one. I hadn't thought of that. Last week I was chatting with a gentleman who's a CIO of probably about $1.5 billion company, and he really focuses, and he always has focused on, ROI. What's going to be what can I point at, for any technology that I'm utilizing or putting in place or whatever, to the bottom line. And as he was looking at it, I asked him. I said, "So tell me, what do you, when you're looking at AI?" Where do you think your biggest bang for the buck comes with AI? And he without even knowing he was saying what you just said, bionic professional. If I list all three of his areas, it's the bionic professional. Number one was um, content marketing, marketing content. He's like, there's great return on that. Number two, customer service, helping those customer service reps to become just, again, bionic, being able to root calls and being able to do things that they couldn't otherwise do. And then finally, the third one was truly the bionic professional, where it's for developers. It's going to develop all their code. It's going to write their code. Now, the developers have to know the code in order to allow the machine or AI to write it, because they do have to still do code review, but they climb up the ladder and they become more architects, right? So they're utilizing AI to, again, do the mundane piece of the code, but now they can focus on, again, business architecture and code review. So truly, like you just said, I like that bionic professional.
Absolutely. And when you think about something, you mentioned the code and the developers, and so we also have some coders who have been leveraging some AI, and overall, it has made them more efficient. But getting back to the bionic professional piece, is you can't just put a couple of prompts in and then have the AI create your code and you're done. They find that AI sometimes creates inefficient code. It overall it makes them more efficient because a lot of the easy stuff the AI can do very quickly, as opposed to someone having to use 10-finger magic and type. But by the same token, you still need that developer coding professional who really understands all the logic streams, because AI doesn't, as much as there's been a lot of training, it doesn't always fully understand that and doesn't always fully understand how the code needs to work with those business processes. And but putting the two together gets you that bionic professional. And the customer service and marketing content. I mean, you've probably seen where people are now using AI to create animation videos and all kinds of different things that used to take a very long time and a lot of um, computing horsepower and deep skills. And there's still skills that are needed, but a lot of the computing horsepower is now being done by AI. And this really gets to, I think of AI as two types of efficiency. One is individual productivity, and the other is truly that business productivity. And that's, from my perspective, where most of the bionic professional comes in. So if you think about personal productivity, probably at this point, just about everybody watching this has used AI. Okay, I wrote an email or I wrote a letter. Let's see if you can make it sound better. And I call that individual productivity. Or, hey, look across my calendar, see when somebody can, a group of people can get together for a meeting. And again, depending on what kind of AI you have going on. But that kind of individual productivity helps at the individual level, but it doesn't really dramatically impact overall business processes. Nothing wrong with developers being more efficient with their coding. Nothing wrong with people who have to send emails to a bunch of people using AI to be able to craft those emails quicker and faster and get that done more quickly. Individual is great. But really, where that bionic professional, I think, comes into play and where the collaboration between business and IT is so important is when you look at the broader business processes. And to your point about focusing on ROI, that's where I think that um, you can see that the both focusing on those business processes can potentially get you the ROI. I'm not saying that if you have 20 developers and all of them start utilizing AI, at some point in the future, you can get the same amount of work done with 19. But by the same token, usually then once they're more productive, people think about all that much more that they want to get done. And but from a business process perspective, if you put AI in the right places, it truly can change those business processes. And that is where you can see some true ROI. I liken it back to automobile factories, right? They have workers. Well, in the 80s, for the first time, they had these wild and crazy things coming in called industrial robots. And they came in, and it took about 20 years. But if you think about where it was in the beginning of the 80s when they first brought in industrial robots to where it is today, it has meant a wholesale change on the assembly line level. We still have thousands of people in automobile plants, but there's less thousands than there used to be. At the same time, those plants are more efficient because the industrial robotic portions have been placed in those areas where they're most efficient, and you have the human workers working where they are most efficient. And I see a lot of that in conversations with business use cases for AI with our business stakeholders and colleagues.
That's actually what this individual mentioned to me. Almost different terms, right? But when he talked about, I look at the ROI and I look at where it's going to flow. He said, "Listen, if accounting comes to me and says I'm going to use some AI and I'm going to reduce our headcount by one, that doesn't get me excited. But like you just talked about, if we put it in for business processes and it helps ROI on a bigger scale, that gets us excited. Again, the Marcom, the customer service, that kind of thing. Maybe the code development, but he said one head count. That's great. You can have them reviewing contracts, and that's one person, but that's not moving the needle in his terms. So I had another gentleman that I was chatting with, and he calls me. He says, Steve, everybody tells me this guy does a lot of work in manufacturing, MES kind of stuff, right? And he said, a lot of people are talking to me about AI and AI is coming for my job and all this stuff. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I got to tell you, he said, I've been doing this a long time. And what I do know about AI is how specific we have to be when we're dialing it in and training those models so we know exactly what we're solving for. He said, I've been an IT professional for a long time. Every time I sit down with an IT with a business group, they don't know what they want. So how are they going to plug into AI exactly what they want and have AI solve it? Because AI only can solve what you ask it to solve. So most of these business folks, when we work with them, we've got to tweak and work with them to tweak what they are really looking for. 'Cause sometimes they don't know A, what's possible, and B, what they really want. We got to tease it out. AI is not doing any of that. So he said, I'm really not too worried about it, at least nowhere in the near future, because that means that business suddenly will change in the respect that it's going to know exactly what it wants from minute one, and AI is going to go solve that. So I heard that and I thought about it for a second. I said, that's kind of age old. I've been hearing that same sort of conversation or rhetoric when we got rid of the business analysts 20 years ago, when we, again, different iterations of business partners, right? We kind of talked about that. Business partners has become such a huge thing nowadays. It's getting bigger and bigger. IT business partners, um, and that's the reason why, because it's a lot of the businesses has always just needed somebody to help them navigate through what's possible with IT and what do they really, really, really need. So
Absolutely.
I've seen that a lot, and I think we're going to continue to see that. And that's why this guy said to me, yeah, I'm not too worried about my job, So what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree, disagree? Where would you fall on that?
I would absolutely agree. I mean, if you think about what everyone talks about with AI, oh, we need the data, we need the data. And I'll talk a little bit about data and data architecture in a moment. But if you think back to, okay, we need reports and we need reporting. Technology has worked with the business for many years to build reporting systems to get the KPIs and the metrics they need. And one of the key things you want to do from a technology perspective is when you're getting together with the business and trying to define those reports and those key performance indicators, you really need to help often do the translation between the baseline data and what it is that the business is looking for. Because very often, oh, well, I want to know how to help the sales team get to that next best action. Okay, great. Well, what data and information around the market is going to help provide that list? Oh yeah, we got to talk about that. And what data can be done and how should it be put together? And I think a lot of the business use case for AI to get to those bionic professionals absolutely requires the same thing, because people talk about the hallucinations of AI. Well, that's because the AI is pulling whatever data it has access to. And again, it is artificial, part of intelligence. And so it sometimes pull it together in ways that don't make sense for the specifics of what someone's doing. That's where a lot of very good coders are working to train AI models, because you need to put those constraints about how the data relates together to each other, and how the business user is going to go in and try and access that data through an AI engine. And those are key elements and aspects, and that is essential. And from an ROI perspective, sure, everybody's worried about jobs being lost, and I'm not saying that as things are more efficient that won't happen. I look at it in terms of, again, if you use the example of containerized shipping, we all know what containerized shipping is. Well, it came in the 1950s. Before that, they didn't have containers. When it did come in, um, there were several hundred thousand dock workers across the US who no longer had a job because they didn't have to do cargo nets every time they unloaded a ship. But the containerization has made things more effective, and the dock workers today who are up on those cranes loading and unloading those ships are in, really nice six-figure salaries. And so ultimately that productivity benefited the workers who were there. And I think that when we look at AI, it's going to be similar. And when people talk about ROI and they think about, well, what does that mean for headcount? I think that's really focusing on the wrong thing. We're doing some very, very interesting stuff that, for competitive reasons, I can't get into very specifics, but we're doing some very interesting stuff on the clinical space. And if you think about it and you say, okay, we have a clinical trial, and that clinical trial is several years long, and then we get the data, and then we have to lock the database. And of course, it all has to be validated through the whole process. That's absolutely essential. And but as they go through it, at the end of the day, the product ideally gets submitted, and assuming approval, what is the market value of that product going to be, say 24 months on, for whatever time frame it is. And I'll make my math easy, right? If you say that 24 months on, this product is going to be worth $360 million a year in revenue, then every month that you can shorten a 3 to 4 to 5 year cycle for getting to the point where you can get through the trials get the data, get it locked, and then go through the analysis, which also can use AI, and get it approved, now you're talking savings of $30 million, or I'm sorry, additional revenue of $30 million for every month you save. It does not take a long time if you can put together some AI capabilities that can shorten a trial set for one compound by even a month or two. If you can do that for two or three, you have one hell of a return on investment for AOI and no ROI rather, and no one has to think about for that return on investment for AI what that meant for headcount.
Right. I mean, that's huge, right? Those dollars. There was somebody I was talking to the other day, and they try and help organizations connect their AI agents that are in different verticals, across, and they were trying to. They said to me something along the lines of having the time of the clinical trial, and I said, "Well, that sounds pretty aggressive, but I think if you talk to folks about, like you just said, a month or two or three, that's still huge numbers. Having the time, that's. I mean, I think that's way out in the future, but maybe we're getting there. I don't really know. I was talking also to an alternative data company recently, and they were telling me, because I think they're right for AI and utilizing AI, right? So, and the alternative data companies take a lot of the, esoteric data and feed it to the hedge funds, and the hedge funds will make calls based on different things that they see going on at, I don't know, fast food outlets, and they'll compare Wendy's to McDonald's to whatever, and then if this is going, if XYZ is taking place in this particular outlet and a bunch of different McDonald's outlets versus in the Wendy's, Arby's, and whatever, that means that there's going to be more revenue coming into those outlets, and then that stock will be 2-3% higher in 6 months. Whatever, I'm just making this scenario up. Um, and I was talking to this guy, and he said we're busier than ever. The hedge funds spend a lot of money on us, all this other stuff. And right now, I guess I didn't even think of this. The alternative data companies are probably very busy because of the government shutdown. BLS is probably hurting anyway. So what he said to me though, as it pertains to AI, when I asked him about AI from the alternative data perspective, he said we can't use any of it because of what you just talked about, the artificial piece. If it doesn't have enough to complete the circle, it's going to hallucinate that last little bit. And he said, we got to check everything anyway. And these hedge funds, we're done. We're done if they find an error, and they're not making, they're going to lose millions. So we've got to, everything's human, every single piece of it, because if we if it just completes a little bit of that circle, we're in trouble, and we don't know if that's real or not. So he said it's getting there, and we like it. But right now, the amount of money that's on the line for the trades that are being done and the amount of money that they spend on us, we just can't. We can't dip into it, which I thought was interesting because I thought that something like that would be real ripe. But I get it. I understand, So it's, we're getting there, right?
Yeah, and when we're talking about AI for business processes, embedding AI in business processes, you hit on one of the absolute key points, which is at this point, and again, pharma and biotech, right? I mean, if you're just doing a search engine and you're Google, it's okay to say this is AI and they can make mistakes and everybody's got to look and see. But when you're in our space, it's a bit different. And so where we're finding efficiencies from a business process perspective, it still is a matter of at the end, you still have a bionic professional who was doing the review and the final edits and making sure that there wasn't that hallucination at the end, or if there was, that it can be fixed before it goes out. And I think that is where, again, right, there's still a lot that AI can do when it's done well and appropriately to make things go faster. Getting back to that example about coders and having it write some code. But at the end of the day, those developers or those business stakeholders who have that professional knowledge and understand their business processes and what's expected, they need to be the ones to look at that output and make sure that everything is what it is. So the process can gain efficiencies, but by the same token, it doesn't work by itself. I had a friend who was an attorney and they were going to court, and they were a defendant for a company, and the plaintiff who was suing, they put in they put in their brief to the judge, and they did not edit and review that before they sent it to the judge. Well, the AI manufactured court cases, made them up. And when the judge realized that that basically he was being given a load of garbage, um, let's just say it did not work out very well for the plaintiff because everything they had submitted wound up getting thrown out. So similarly, in the pharma space, right? Again, AI is we're doing some amazing things, and it's only going to get better in terms of helping the bionic professionals to utilize AI. But that professional side of the bionic is absolutely essential to make sure that the process works as intended.
Yeah, we can't have those mistakes because, yeah, a court case gets thrown out, or yeah, whatever, someone doesn't buy that cheeseburger, but we're dealing with human lives. Our mistakes are literally fatal, right? If something like that happens, and the way I understand it, and you may know more about this than me. I don't know any more than I'm about to say, but I think the FDA now has an AI sort of arm or an AI division, right? So they're hitting that head on. They have to, right? Because it's here. So.
Absolutely. And my understanding is they're looking at potential for using AI for some of the review of the submissions. And again, from a portion of that process, I expect that AI will be able to work very, very well for them. But it is important. You can't just turn it loose and then say, oh, whatever it comes up with is the answer. You need to have those professionals, whether those are the professionals at the FDA or the professionals in pharma and biotech who are presenting to the FDA. And
I love that bionic professional. I'm stealing that, and I'll footnote you on everything when I steal.
well,
I love that. That's awesome.
to be fair, I stole it myself because I really liked it when I heard it too. So
I
go
mean, it's
for it.
perfect. It's so appropriate for everything we talk about. I hadn't heard or read about that yet, so I like it. Now, so earlier, and when we talked a year and a half ago, we talked a lot about data, right? And everybody's always talking about data because data is the gasoline that has to be pristine that goes into these engines, right? These LLMs and so on and so forth. Um, you mentioned a minute ago that you wanted to touch on some data. Tell me about that. What have you what's new or what's different about from a year and a half ago when we spoke about data that goes through AI?
I like to say, I've said this for a long time, data flows like water. It flows in whatever way someone wants it to flow, and it can wander in various ways. And early on, again, when we were first talking, I had a number of consultants who came in and, oh, we're going to build this big data lake for AI. We're going to pull in the data, build it, and they will come. The business will come and figure out how they can utilize the data in AI and do things better. And don't get me wrong, I think the movie Field of Dreams was a great movie. But when it comes to whether it's building it for reporting structures or building it for AI, um, honestly, at that point, I didn't return any more of their calls because I don't believe that that's going to be helpful. Just like AI, when you're doing reporting, if you don't have good quality data, people uh, you know, lose the ability to believe in the quality of the reports they're getting and what they're seeing, and then business insight suffers. And similarly with AI, um, I like to think of it more if you think about water, right, and you think about the reservoir system for a large city, you don't just have one big thing. You have multiple rivers and multiple streams that feed into ultimately usually multiple reservoirs. And then there is a very structured process to take that data, make sure it's pure, make sure it's got what it needs, and then to flow it through to the endpoints so that all the people can use it and the industries can use it. And I like to think of the evolving AI architecture, and a lot of it is data architecture, as a very similar piece. I mean, today, when you think of, oh, we need to do business reporting, you don't have a clinical data that is in the same place as commercial data that is in the same place as your financial data. You have individual data environments with specific rules in terms of how the data is processed as well as who can see it. And I see a lot of that as kind of the future for AI, and honestly some of what we've been putting together in our AI that we're working with our business stakeholders on. Because if you've got commercial data, you certainly don't want you certainly don't need or want clinical data coming into there, because then something that should not be released may get out to somebody or be used in an inappropriate way. And similarly, if it's clinical data, obviously validated only, you're certainly not going to bring in commercial or finance. Why would you? Because that's not what you need to do with that. And so I, I I like to call it, I used to call it data guardrails. Now it's data and AI guardrails. And you have those data spaces, and understanding the specific business use cases and how that data is going to be utilized, because even within the clinical and the R&D space, and we again going back to clinical trials, even within that there's the clinical trial information, there's a variety of things that you need and can do with that base clinical data, all the sites reporting in, but then there's also the statistical analysis. And even though ultimately it's all data from the clinical side, your statistical analysis data sets and the statistical tools you're using is in a different area than your baseline clinical data environment. And so really from an AI perspective, where we've seen it be most successful for the business processes is when you fundamentally understand what kind of data each of those business processes needs and uses, and then look at how you can teach an AI model while at the same time restricting what it can access to what the business users use today, because that dramatically minimizes the amount of hallucination. And even where there is hallucination, it just may be a little bit different ultimate result set without going completely crazy and being something where someone says, oh, this makes no sense whatsoever.
Right, right. Yeah. So where does all of this fall into security slash governance? I mean, you can't, like you just said, guardrails, you got to have rules in place. Um, you got to be thinking about all that right there with what you were just talking about, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And it's one of those things where it's great to have the chat GPT that you can go on for free and utilize on the internet. But that's not if you're going to use chat GPT for the business, for us, that's not where you're going to use it. Because if you go in there, anyone, other people can look at what data you're putting in, what the results are coming out. Needless to say, you don't want your proprietary information in the public sector. So from a compliance perspective, I would say the easiest thing is, and we've done this for a number of our business solutions, is you bring an engine into in our case, our cloud environment. Some people have on-prem, but our cloud environment, and then what is used to train that model, the configuration of that model, all of that resides within our space. And there are people who are creating their own models from scratch, and there's nothing wrong with that. I will tell you that we're looking to do things in a slightly different way because we're of a certain size. And so we're bringing in known LLMs that are very good at, we've seen that they're very good at what they do. The consultants we're working with have seen they're very good at what they do. And then we bring them in and we put them into our environment. For example, we have one LLM that we're using, and again, I don't want to start throwing names out, but we brought it in because we talked with a consulting firm that had used it successfully for several other pharma and biotech clients, and they said, "Hey, this LLM is actually exceptional. The way that they've baseline trained the model, it really does really well with medical terms." So for us, for some of our R&D clinical area, having that LLM made it, we actually did a test with that and two other LLMs, and it blew the other two out of the park. And, there is really a difference. You can't just say, oh, use, X LLM for everything that we do. It just doesn't work that way. At the same time, from an architecture perspective, you can't have 20 different LLMs. So there is a bit of an artistry going on about sometimes you need different LLMs, but by the same token, we're trying to build a consistent platform. Even if the data is different for the different business use cases, we're trying to have a consistent platform so that you don't have everything be different.
So these are pre-canned LLMs that a consulting firm's developed. They lease them, sell them, whatever you want to you guys, and you run your own internal data through that LLM.
Yes, plus. So it is an LLM. It is a base LLM that anybody can license, and then they take our data and our specific disease states, because that's a key piece if you're on the clinical side and different things, the R&D side, and then with our business, giving them the background for our disease state, what are key elements that are important. They then are taking that LLM and then doing additional configuration so that from a business process perspective, it is it is able to leverage the data in a way that our business, our bionic professionals would do themselves. You know, and, and that's the key thing where, you know, you get the executive team and ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini. Oh, gee, is it copy and paste? We just put an LLM and then we put it up against our clinical data and we'll get all these great results. And the answer is not quite that way. It's just like if you do your Google search or Bing search or whatever you search with AI, it can make mistakes. You need to take the business specific use cases, how the business interpolates the data among the different data sets and sources, and put all that and configure that. That is the true training of a model. And the more that you can train a model for a specific business use case, what we've seen is the better the results tend to be.
Interesting. That's cool. I like that. That's nice. Okay. All right. Good. Well, so I mean, we've gone through quite a bit here, and we're getting we're getting close to the end. So, is there anything more that you think has that we should talk about that we haven't covered, um, that our audience might want to hear about? That's either changed over the last year and a half, or that's new. That's helping us or helping you do what you do best.
Well, I'm proud of the way that myself, but more importantly, the technology team that I lead, really collaborate with business stakeholders and business colleagues. And we really have a very collaborative mindset. And of course, our business appreciates that.
Mm.
And one of the things that I will say is that AI is changing so rapidly. I mean, even in that example I gave where you have the engine and you configure it and you get it up and running, the engines themselves are being updated so quickly that there is a lot that's evolving because AI is doing some great stuff and we've already been able to have some solutions, some business solutions that actually have positive ROI, which is fabulous. And by the way, that was without having the ROI did not include any headcount reductions. I'll just say that.
Not cool. Good.
But by the same token, we've already had to go through two additional updates because as the models get updated, now we bring those newer models in and we update with the configuration and now they improve even more on something that was already giving business value. And and at the same time, not a surprise. All these different consultants are reaching out to the business areas, and the PowerPoint slides all look great. But you don't want AI to be thousands based on everybody that's ever talked to anyone on the business or for that matter the technology side. And so that collaboration where You work together, and it's not just one solution for everything. That's not going to be efficient or effective. But by the same token, you do need to have a reasonably common platform. We have more than one we have more than one agentic AI solution, and we have more than one LLM supporting those. But we've probably had 20 or 30 get proposed to us, and so far we've been able to find 3 that can be used for a multitude of business processes. You don't have to have 20. And our overall data platform and how we kind of constrain the data for the AI for the specific business use case has also been essential.
Very cool. Well, good. Good, good, good. I'm glad. It sounds like things are evolving, things are changing. That's why we did a rerun here and had you on for another visit, and I appreciate your time and I thank you very much. As
Thank you.
before, right? I asked one personal question at the end. Last time it was about music, and if I remember correctly, I didn't go back and look, but I think you pointed at Bruce Springsteen, and that was your favorite live show, and so on and so forth. This time I'm going to ask you about a movie, right? What movie would you say is one of your favorites or your favorite, and why?
Well, okay. So
I'm just trying this on. Let's see how it works, right?
it's so it is tough to find one movie favorite, but
Okay.
although I go by Bill Wallace, of course, my name is William Wallace. And if I had to pick one movie overall, I'm going to go with Braveheart
There you
because
go. Good.
because
Right.
Braveheart basically has given 20 years of people I've met for the first time. Oh, do you yell freedom every so often?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's funny. That's great. I often wonder that. And Bill, never once have I brought that up to you. Never once have I asked. Never once have I, because I'm like, he hears this all day long, but I'm glad you proactively brought it up so I don't ever have to ask you that again or
Yeah,
think
well,
about it.
my response for many years has been, yeah, I really love Braveheart, and my wife wishes I look like Mel Gibson too. So what can I say?
That's good. I like it.
Yep.
I like it. Cool. Well, good. Well, I appreciate it, Bill. Thank you very much. This has
Thank
been
you.
awesome. And we'll do it again in another year and a half. How's that?
Sounds fabulous. Looking forward to it already.